Australians.
Yo. GM.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey Trish, hey Tom, hey Simon. Welcome back everyone. Ready for another deep dive. This is ecosystem hour, and always awesome. I think today we're talking DePIN. And I'm Dai, and your host, and joining me is Simon, our co-host, as well as co-founder at Uglify, and Dom, co-founder at Hivelo, and Trish from Killing Finance. Great to have you guys here. Just say GM, and what are you guys most excited about today's discussion?
I guess I can kick off. I don't know if my audio is okay. Can you confirm that? You're able to hear me okay? Perfect. Yeah.
It's great.
Well, I'm very pleased to meet Dom for the first time. I believe our companies have partnered already. It was my co-founder, Philip, that had led all the way. So it's great to meet you, and great to meet you as well, Simon and Dai, today. So yeah, very open for an open collaboration of discussion on all things crypto, not just DePIN.
Yeah, I'm excited. The concept behind this, there was a couple of partners that we couldn't quite line up on the time, but the idea was to have sort of more education, open discussions about like the DePIN industry, like what's happening in DePIN, what's the future potential of DePIN, discussing it, maybe breaking it down into easier terms, and in the process talking about Clink, talking about Hivelo, and some of the amazing things coming for DePIN. So I'm just excited to learn, to be here to contribute, but also learn more about DePIN from some experienced veterans in the industry, learn more about Hivelo, learn more about Clink, and also just to help educate the audience and people in general around the amazing potential of what's to come regarding this technology and how it benefits everyday people. So that's exciting. It's exciting for me.
Awesome. I think we're in for a great discussion. Maybe Dom, you want to say something before we kick off?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just to start with a little bit of story around the whole concept of DePIN. Most people don't know that DePIN, and we're talking about decentralized compute, is about 30 to 40 years old as a concept. And in fact, as an execution, and there was a small little group called NASA a number of years ago, 30, 40 years ago, that was generating a lot of content, a lot of information from their satellites and telescopes around the world, and they didn't have the compute. They didn't have the centralized compute in terms of processing all of this data. And so they set up a research labs called SETI, and this was really the first push into decentralized compute. And so they basically, and I'll tell you a real life example. When I was a teenager, I downloaded this application called SETI on my computer. And so every night it would download a bunch of raw data from NASA. My computer would process this data and then send it back to SETI, back to NASA. And this is before the advent of blockchain. And so humans being humans, there's got to be a reward in it, something in it for everyone. And so if you found a planet or a star, you would be involved in naming that planet or star. And I remember having two machines running, hoping every morning when I woke up that I found that star. I didn't, but it was great to be part of the network. And so that was the first real life example of decentralized compute. Fast forward to the advent or the internet going mainstream in the sort of mid 90s. All things internet back then were decentralized. If you built a website, you would host it on your machine at home or at the office. And then, really what happened over the last 20 or so years is things became much more centralized. And with the advent of blockchain and crypto, the whole philosophy of decentralization became, increasingly more important. That's how we create a much more resilient and open and permissionless environment. And my view is what DePIN's going to do is help bring and change the physical infrastructure, and we'll sort of do a deep dive on some of the infrastructure and some of the DePINs in the space to move back to the ethos of the internet, move back to the ethos of all things blockchain, where they are in effect decentralized, owned by the community and benefiting the community financially as well.
Love the intro. I love that intro. So maybe it's a good transition actually to maybe get to know a little bit more about you guys, both yourself, Dom, and Chris. Maybe if you could give like a little quick introduction about yourself and also the company that you represent or the companies you guys have founded, and where that comes in DePIN. And then we can kind of go deeper into the topic of DePIN and all things DePIN. So yeah, that'd be a great transition.
Absolutely. Happy to just start off being involved in tech since the mid-90s. I'll put up my hand and say I'm a nerd. I love new tech. Been involved in crypto since 2013. Launched a number of companies. The most notable is a company called Banksa. Banksa is one of the leading fiat on and off ramps in the space, second behind MoonPay. And the key learnings around Banksa was the whole concept, and I'll sort of, this kind of will move into why Havelo, back in sort of 2013 and 14, when people wanted to get involved in crypto, they didn't start with Bitcoin or a stable coin. They started with US dollars or euro or GBP in their back pocket. And so the whole premise around Banksa was making the fiat on ramps, the conversion of fiat money into Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other tokens really seamless. And fast forward to today, Banks has done billions of dollars of transaction volume, and some of the key learnings there was making the process super simple, being able to appeal to the Web 2 audiences.
Just a quick note on this, Dom. Just a quick fun note on this actually, because I remember using Banksa back in the day. Before Banks, I was having to use local Bitcoins, I think, as a tool for swapping in and out of Bitcoin. I think it was before was using Binance and things like that, was using like P2P marketplaces, and then ended up transitioning to Banksa. So I thought that was just a cool note of like how crazy it actually used to be on and off ramping. It was like in the early days, we take it for granted now, but it was really wild.
It was hard. It was actually challenging in order to do it. And once again, that a good segue into Havelo. And so we're big believers of decentralization and really power back to the people, and hence we saw DePIN as a really interesting vertical, but it's technically complicated and challenging. And so applying the same philosophy around how can we make this super simple. And so what Havelo is, we're a DePIN aggregation and orchestration platform. So you download it onto your computer, it works out what your CPU, your GPU, your graphics card, and your IP address, and all of those kinds of wonderful things. And then it will install and run the best DePINs on your machine to maximize the rewards, maximize basically what you get paid. And that's really the whole philosophy around Havelo. Some people say it's like the Airbnb for your computer. If you've got a spare room or a house because you're away on holiday, you use Airbnb to basically earn some extra income. Same philosophy with Havelo. It's like Airbnb for your computer. So yeah, over to you, Chris.
Okay, kind of reminds me of Bitcoin mining in the early days, right? Like I remember literally early mining pools where you would run your computer and mine Bitcoin just from the computer. It's quite interesting how we're seeing this transition into similar thing. But yeah, Chris, on to you.
Thank you, guys. That's I've spoke with the Banksa teams as well, Dom. I didn't put it two and two together. I believe there's an Australian company, right? So I think for anyone that's listening, you learn over the years of being in Web3. It's not the biggest space, right? You come across the same people and faces, right? So that's great to hear. Yeah, so my name, as you can see, is Chris. I'm based in Germany. I'm Irish. Grew up in Ireland most of my life. Lived in New York, London, Berlin now. I've lived in Lisbon, all basically working in financial services. I took the red pill into crypto, let's say, in around 2017, 18, when I started actually moving into more of the venture builder landscape. So validating various different business models, understanding what works, what doesn't work, testing different services, etc., etc. I'm building Clink since around 2021 with my co-founder. We're a team of about 22 people now. We are not DePIN native, but we're certainly an assistance towards driving user acquisition and intent into those DePIN networks, right? And as facilitating people to provide the compute. We describe ourselves as a wealth creation platform. People will mostly know us as a consumer platform where users can begin their crypto journey from zero. We're a wallet whereby there's various different ways in which people can earn cryptocurrency for free. So we facilitate airdrops, we facilitate affiliate offers, whereby we enable our community to drive into third-party services and actually get paid for doing so. So that actually ranges into various different pieces. We work with exchanges, we work with DEXs, we work with play-to-earn games. We're working with actually a tremendous amount of Web 2 offers as well, right? So we work with Uber Eats. We've partnered with Revolut in the UK. User acquisition is something that never goes out of fashion in a bear or a bull cycle. People will always use it. And I think what's very much broken in Web3 is almost an exploitation of people's energy and time, right? In terms of the activities they do online. So we really try to initiate that basically real enablement and rewards are earned from the ecosystem of offers that we're providing within our platform. What's been presented in the last couple of weeks is that we're actually moving to be more of a B2B infrastructure now. So everything that we've proven product market fit for, we actually want to become more of an integration layer of our services across other platforms that want to basically fairly activate and monetize their community, whether it be through questing services, facilitating airdrops or affiliate offers on their own platform on a revenue share based model, and we have a few other things in the pipeline. So we're very much a wealth creation technology group, I would say now, as we're getting bigger and bigger. So we dropped into the DePIN game a little bit late. I think what we are is very much a service provider for that user acquisition, right? So if we take a step back, I think Bitcoin is obviously not in itself a DePIN, but it enabled decentralization, right? And a form of compute that was not central to one benefactor in any way, shape, or form. And I think if you look at the Web3 communities that are out there, there's a lot of native capability and understanding of generally how it works, right? Because it's that level of education. So to support High Velo's network, to support other DePIN providers that we're working with, we've partnered on the airdrops, we've partnered on affiliate offers, we've partnered on node sales, etc., for a number of different DePIN projects to facilitate that they can actually grow a network of users across the world to facilitate basically the ecosystems that they're driving as well. We actually want to envision maybe our own form of DePIN and our own platform, but for now we're more of a facilitator for businesses that are moving their way into the market.
Makes sense. I mean, okay, so let's transition into, like, let's simplify. What is DePIN? Like, I made a video recently on YouTube that got quite a good number of views, and it was breaking down, okay, DePIN, we use this term, decentralized, physical infrastructure networks, like a pretty big mouthful. It's a word that seems to have come in more recently, even though it was a thing that's been around for a while. To the average user, right? They're sort of lost in the world of like decentralization, blockchains. What is DePIN? What is not DePIN? And what would we classify now as DePIN in terms of how we relate that to the end user? I mean, I know there's compute, there's mapping software, there's Wi-Fi networks, there's a whole bunch of different companies, but like, how would you, Dom, and then maybe after Chris, how would you explain DePIN to everyday users?
Yeah, I think just to maybe take a step back, within DePIN, there's two really core segments. There's DePINs that require their own dedicated hardware, like Helium and Hive Mapper. And then there's DePINs that can work on an existing computer, desktop, laptop, or mobile phone. So I just want to kind of like differentiate between those two core areas. The concept of DePIN is being part of building a network and getting rewarded for running part of that network. And so there's a concept of, value creation and value sharing, and that's the big difference between the centralized networks where there's maybe one or two key stakeholders or shareholders, while with decentralized networks there are thousands, if not millions, of stakeholders who are actually getting rewarded. So they're participating in creating the network and getting paid for it. So there's a real sort of difference around how the money flows at the end of the day. And just to kind of give some real life examples, examples that I think are really quite interesting. Helium 5G in the US. So they're now partnering with telcos, and as you know, 5G really good from a from a bandwidth perspective, but doesn't really go around buildings or through concrete that well. And so having 5G infills, so I could basically, in the US only, buy a Helium 5G basically hotspot, place it in my home, in the office, and as people roam across it, I actually get paid for providing part of that network. So that's just one example. The other's HiveMapper, which is another one that I really like. Think of it as they are creating the decentralized or the next generation of Google Maps. And so you buy this bit of hardware and you put it into your car, and as you drive around, you're basically getting paid for generating new content or updated content for their version of Google Maps. So that's kind of on that physical hardware side. Other examples, a lot of people have got spare computers at home. There are tens of millions of spare desktops and laptops. And so being able to effectively share out your storage, your CPU, your GPU, effectively your computer resources to create decentralized networks, you're basically then sharing in the upside, in the creation and also the financial economics of those particular networks. So hopefully, I've given a few examples of some real life use cases in terms of DePIN, and I'd love to at some point double click on Havelo and how we solve some of the problems and challenges around DePIN. But maybe over to you, Chris.
Sure. I don't think I could explain it as well as you. I know you're in the driver's seat of probably answering that every single day of the week. I always like, based that our own consumer base can be very Web 2 enabled. I always like to run very simple analogies that can kind of correspond to maybe a business model or something that they understand. And something I spoke about probably a few months ago now with a friend down the pub, doesn't know anything about crypto, explains some models, is if you remember many years ago, a business model came around where people started to put solar panels on top of their houses, right? So fundamentally, that was a power back to a decentralized network of people where they obtained value for providing storage or power to a group or a network. That's exactly the same as DePIN, except it's more broad on chain. Obviously, in terms of the technologies that we're building now, it's more tokenized in terms of the reward structure. But in terms of a simple essence of a business model, it's taking away big stores of centralized power, whether it be AWS in terms of storage, maintenance, as opposed to Filecoin and other kind of decentralized networks. It can be in terms of the data architecture or the data lakes, let's say, that AI models are learning from. But the core component that you really need to think about is you're taking it away from a central intermediary. And what you're actually doing is creating a network of participants where there's mutual value for actually supporting that network. So I think it's been done very well in the Web 2 world. I always like to use the solar panel example because it's quite tangible to people that are not even knowing what cryptocurrencies or tokenization even is, right? So I think the fundamentals of the business model portray quite well if you give it that reasoning.
To touch base on that solar panel example, actually, just to break it down, it's basically, as you said, you set up solar panels on your house. I know my parents did this many, many years ago, and then excess power that's generated goes back to the grid and you get paid for it. So you're essentially like selling power back to the grid and monetizing it, which is exactly what you said. So what would you say are the core benefits of this being on-chain and decentralized versus centralized. What are the differences between the old solar panel model, where it's kind of done manually without blockchain, versus having a blockchain involved in this? Maybe what the pros and cons of this are. Like, are there downsides to actually doing this on blockchain and using blockchain as opposed to having an intermediary? I'm curious on that front.
Yeah, I can probably kick off of that. I think it's hard enough for people to even understand the space that we operate in. I know it's always said, but we're still very early. I think people in my line of work, you'll come to find people are very skeptical when something is for free, right? I think it's a natural part of humanity, right? As we get older and deal with the many different facets of life, right? You get a little bit hardened. I think if you add a layer of complexity of bringing, like, what does on-chain mean, right? You know, where is this chain? You'd be surprised how little people actually know. And to be honest with you, sometimes even have that much of an interest in our Web3 world, right? You have to take that on the chin. That's absolutely fine, right? Not all of us are as interested into it as we are. But I think, you know, if we go by a solar panel, you know, you think of hardware, right? What is another piece of hardware? It can be your computer. It can be a VPN that you're using. It can be data that you're getting from your smartwatch, right? It can be any form of assistance in terms of collaborating in some form of instance where you're actually adding compute or information back to a network, whether it be decentralized or not. So I think the fundamentals of the model come back again. When I think of the benefits of performance of being decentralized, I think it boils back to the central benefits of being on chain, right? It's complete transparency, it's fairness, it's a trustless architecture, right? A lot of the times it's impenetrable, it's immutable, right? So like the systems are set into place. And I also think that the distribution can be quite fair as well, right? So if you think about the way in which people can actually distribute whatever point of value, I know there's, as Dom has said, many different versions of DePIN, right? But most of it is built through technology, right? It's more web-based. It can be a lot of the time, right? So I think to provide such information back to that network, it's a lot more seamless to be doing it from the ways in which the blockchains can operate.
Yeah, cool. Absolutely. And there's a concept, you know, we're kind of talking about the pros and cons of decentralization and blockchain. And there's a concept in DePIN called a cold start. We know that it takes a lot of time and money, in fact, billions of dollars, to build infrastructure and networks. And so really with the advent of blockchain and tokens, you know, what projects can do in the early stages is that they can use their token as a way to incentivize the community to build out that network. And as the network builds, it then basically is, let's call it, big enough, resilient enough for there to be businesses and individuals wanting to use these particular networks. And then, you know, money flowing on the demand side. And then, you know, over time, you know, the number of tokens that you get from that cold start process decreases because the revenue that you've got from the demand side increases. And at some point creating some kind of equilibrium. And I think that's what's important. And if you just take Helium 5G, you know, it's the fastest growing telco network anywhere in the world in terms of the number of hotspots or points of presence, which you just couldn't have got done in a centralized kind of way. And at Havelo, you know, we're adopting a very similar process. You know, right now, when you download our application, we work out, you know, what are the best DePINs to run. As of today, we're supporting 7 DePINs. We'll have 50 DePINs running by the end of 2025, and then obviously using AI to optimize. And what we're doing from an earnings perspective, obviously you're earning the native DePIN tokens, but then you're also earning the Havelo token as well as, you know, extra yield. And so as the number of DePIN tokens that we have integrate go up and the revenue goes up, you know, we can obviously, you know, reduce to a degree the number of Havelo tokens that people are earning. So once again, one of the key benefits of all things DePIN is those people that are early in the community and deploying the network are usually the ones that get rewarded the most because they're the early stage. So the tokens are a lower price. You get more tokens, biggest bang for buck. And obviously, as the network grows, the number of tokens decreases. So, being coming early, and just to sort of jump in from a Havelo perspective, people that go in and download the application, will be part of the airdrop that's happening post TGE. And that's just a way for us to say thank you to our community, our audience, who's been running the Havelo nodes from early on.
Yeah, and we'll delve deeper into Havelo in a bit and the platform, and we'll go deeper into Clink as well. But I think maybe to add to that last bit that we talked about, the benefits of decentralization, one that really interested me was Sentinel DVPN. That was like decentralized VPNs, and I think of like the utilities of needing that for like censorship resistance of VPNs and things like that around the world. And the other one that also interests me is I remember a while ago when was it a cloud compute I think it was in Germany, right? That basically banned all validators. I can't remember the name of it. It's like a competitor to AWS, and a lot of validators were using it, and they basically said we won't deal with business with anyone using crypto or whatever, and they shut everybody down. And it was like one of those big kind of wake up calls around these centralized companies can just like pull the rug from under you and do all sorts of things that could impact you. And if we think about, they talk about like, crypto's like decentralized and immutable and everything like that. But like, what if AWS shuts you down, right? Like there is vectors and things out there that can actually impact stuff. So I think the importance of like decentralization to censorship resistance there is like really key, and I think it's applicable to lots of areas. But there's different reasons maybe for wanting decentralization across different networks, not just necessarily censorship resistance. Maybe it's if you've got a center that has an issue or whatever, like it's better if you've got it like spread out across multiple countries and networks. It somewhat also reminds me a bit in a slightly different way of the way that I guess like Bitcoin mining and nodes and proof of stake networks work, right? Where the concept is very similar and very crypto native around, a distributed network of people all around the world contributing towards securing a network, right? It's a different way, but everybody is contributing towards like making blockchain work or running blockchain. Or with mining, it started with it turned into like more centralized mining centers, but it started off with mining pools where you could set up your computer and you could join a mining pool and use your computer power, pair it with 1,000 other computers from around the world who are just nerds in their bedrooms, like looking into Bitcoin, and you could actually like contribute to this technology. And so it's slightly different because I think DePIN is more dealing with like the physical world, like wireless networks and things like that. But I think the concept is very similar in nature around that. So, and getting rewarded. So just a food for thought. Di, do you want to take us into our next segment, and then we can kind of delve into other tangents?
Yeah, sure. Basically, I think there's somewhat, I'm seeing a pattern here. I think it's all about cutting out the middleman and like putting like the power pack in the hand of the user. Like, okay, so DePIN sound amazing, but there have to be some challenges. No tech is perfect, and we're here for the tech though. But I think, is there any hurdles or challenges that you guys are thinking of or dealing with at the moment? Maybe Dom?
Yeah, like any new technology and any new vertical, there's going to be those challenges, whether it's tech challenges, educational challenges as well. And one of the things that we've seen specifically in the DePIN space is there is a high degree of complexity. There are a small number of DePINs that are point and click, but most of them will require you to run a Docker. There's a number of platforms that require you to run a Kubernetes instance, and most people don't even know what Kubernetes is, let alone how to actually run it. And so, once again, our view is, and I think this is the big opportunity and one of the challenges for all of us, in Web3 is how can we create an interface, an experience that looks and feels like Web 2. So my parents, for example, can use Amazon and Spotify. How can we make Web3 as easy as that? And I think that's a one of the challenges that we're trying to solve at Havelo, and I think as an industry we're trying to solve as well. And if you just want to sort of double click on DePIN, if you want to run, let's call it, a dozen different DePINs on your computer, it's highly probable you're going to need multiple wallets because they run on different chains. You're going to need the native tokens of that DePIN as well as the other tokens for gas. So it creates this whole complexity around that. And then what are the best DePINs to run on my machine in my particular country? And then if I want to get paid in the native DePIN tokens or stablecoin, how can I do that in an efficient way? And once again, that's part of the challenge and process that Havelo is trying to solve is, ultimately giving customers a choice of, do I want to get paid in the native DePIN tokens, stablecoin, or cash directly into my bank account? We're implementing a system, basically where you stake Havelo once, and then you get access to all of these DePINs without having to stake on each individual DePIN. Once again, just trying to create a much simpler user experience, and then over time, using an AI agent to optimize or personalize the DePINs that are running on your machine in order to maximize the ROI. So they're really some of the challenges, opportunities, and also benefits that Havelo brings to the table.
Awesome, Chris. What challenges do you foresee for like maybe the adoption of DePIN, or it could be anything. It could be also like the role of blockchain in DePIN. Like we talk about like decentralization as benefit over centralization. Like what are some of those challenges that you see?
Yeah, I think there's a certain persona of people in Web3 that are very up for like supporting early ecosystems and compute right across their devices or whatever kind of model it is. And we're still, I feel, quite early in the segment, but there's always a maturity phase, right? Whether it be for both Web 2 and Web 3 models, as we've spoke about, right? If these things get so big, right, and they can challenge Goliaths and Web 2 partners that are offering such services, right, it requires a significant amount of community, right? It needs a significant amount of community in different regions across the world as well, right? So structurally, these early adopters, these people can be from all across the world, but they tend to be out of certain regions, right? So I would say maybe a concern I would have is in terms of the scalability, right? But I guess that goes without saying with any early stage of the segment, right? Who thought we would be here where we are today when it comes to the Web3 markets, right? And all the innovation that's coming in. But those early actors, guys like Dom, guys who are obviously have proven their model in some respect, it's upon solving those problems to bring commute into areas of the world, right? And to be able to facilitate something that can really actually challenge the Web 2 world. So I don't think that has been necessarily answered yet. But as you can see, right, we've already seen some early use cases with Helium, etc. I didn't realize they had so much growth until you had presented it. That this model has been proven to some regards, but can it actually work its way into every kind of sub-segment that it's trying to serve? That's probably one thing that I'd want to see, or at least founders who are actually directly into space are trying to solve at this point.
I remember one that got a lot of adoption. I don't actually know if this one was legit or not. Called Pi, I think it was, where you ran something on your phone, where you like opened up your phone and you ran the app in the background, and that one got quite a lot of like momentum or noise. I don't know if it ever was legit or if it was more kind of a scammy thing. So that guy thought one thing that I think that I question, which will be interesting, is I'd love to see this at scale in terms of the monetization and how much people can earn. Like if I think about, let's say a data center, right, that buys, like really, really powerful computers or is able to just like concentrate this in a really powerful way and they monetize it. Like if you spread it across everybody's basic computers, like how much is your computer power really worth, right? And especially if you're running a pretty basic desktop computer, I'd be really curious to figure out that maths in different ways around like, how much value is your mobile phone or your computer providing towards a network enough to get paid a substantial amount for them to be worth doing it, like whether it's electricity costs of running things, Just like, with, mining, it's not worth running mining on your computer anymore, right? Like it just doesn't work anymore. So in that concept, I'm always thinking in my mind, like, yes, ideologically, it's a great idea having this. And I'd imagine that it probably works best when you have many different DePINs and you're running many. And this is where I think Havelo comes in, because you're then benefiting from monetization of different things. But I'd love, from my perspective, the challenge around this is figuring out in the head, like, if someone's like weighing this up and going, like, how much can I actually earn from running this idly on my computer? What is it costing me from a power perspective, or from a, having to run a computer all the time? Maybe it's like a wear on devices, compared to actually how much I earn from this. And I know you're earning tokens, but even outside of tokens, like, is the fees being generated enough to bring value to a computer? So that's just something I'm quite curious about, compared to the economies of scale of buying hardware in like bulk and actually setting up data centers or whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, I think there's. I'll answer that in a couple of different ways. Maybe just to start with the first point, and that is, what can people potentially earn? I think it's a function of what kind of computer you've got, what country you're in, and how long you've actually been on the network. Typically, if you've been on the network for longer, you've got a high degree of trust, and you'll attract more, let's call it, more traffic. But just to kind of give people out there who are watching and listening a kind of bit of a ballpark, from an old desktop to a kick-ass gaming machine with a NVIDIA card, think of anywhere from like $20 a month on the low end to $300 on the high end. And that's a range, and that's kind of how we've kind of modeled it out at Havelo at scale. And there's obviously quite a bit of space in between, and so $20 a month may not mean much to us here in Western markets, but if you take emerging markets, $20 will basically buy food for the day or the week or even the month in some countries, and so. So just to kind of give a little bit of insight, but where I see let's call it the big dollars, the big dollars compared to the some of the other segments, is in AI. There's a big demand to train AI models right now. Most of the money is going towards the Amazon, the Googles of the world. And there's actually a major economic benefit of training AI models in a decentralized way. And when I'm saying it's basically cheaper, and it's cheaper by a factor of 80 to 90%, like significantly different. And just to kind of double click on that, and it was only when I sort of went down this rabbit hole that I kind of discovered the opportunity as well, which kind of once again reinforces my love for Havelo, is if you're a home user, you buy an NVIDIA graphics card because you're a gamer for between $500 and a couple of $1,000. If I'm an enterprise to buy the same kind of card, when I say same kind of card in terms of output, it costs roughly 10 times the amount, because it comes in a rack, it comes with nice management software, but it comes with a license to do it in an enterprise as opposed to as a consumer. And so, what a lot of these AI companies are now starting to see is that they can now train their AI models at a fraction of the cost compared to these centralized data centers that are out there. And so, that's for me. You take companies like Asana, which we're actually integrating as we speak, or Akash and GPU.net, IO.net, and Render, and many others. And so, in that respect, I think there's significant opportunity. And that's, coming back to your question, Simon, in terms of the dollars, that's where the big money is right now in DePIN. And just to double click on that a little bit more, one of our strategic investors is a group called Animoca Brands, huge in the gaming space across Asia. They're an investor in us, and they not only invested purely to make a return, but they've got a big gaming community, and they saw the synergy between Havelo and basically allowing their gaming communities to basically earn extra income by using Havelo. So hopefully that's just given a little bit of insight into some of the unit economics and how it works commercially.
That's really interesting, actually. So, so the licensing that some of the companies like NVIDIA put on enterprise clients makes it, running this on my own computer much more efficient for these AI companies to pay for. And I know there's like a big battle around the world for even acquiring some of these, it's like fights around the world for acquiring compute, right? Like seems that people can't get enough. So that's really interesting. So I'd be curious to know if like maybe NVIDIA might adjust their strategies if they find like everything's going decentralized and they're losing a bunch of revenue on licensing. It's going to be quite interesting how that goes. But that's a really good case for DePIN. That seems to, obviously one of the reasons why the renders and the Akashs of the world are getting so much traction and their tokens are flying through the roof. That's really, really cool. Dai, do you want to take us to our next segment? That was actually really good. I think that's great insight from that perspective.
Yeah, I want to tap into the financial incentive a little bit. Maybe we can break down the financial side, like what makes a DePIN project or network economically sustainable. Like we talk about token incentive, seem like a big driver. But I'm wondering, are they sustainable long term, or like we also seeing like liquidity incentive? Is it the same thing as token incentive, or is there any difference? Yeah, some question around.
Okay, so the question would be more like kind of around revenue, I guess. So you're using tokens and you inflate it, like using the tokens to bootstrap the network. At what point do they become sustainable in terms of being able to generate revenue to either buy back the token or make like that incentivization actually real yield or real sustainable? So that I think was the main point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll maybe sort of start with that. Maybe just to talk about the Havelo business model. The app's free for customers out there, and we just take a revenue share of all the tokens that customer mines. So our incentive is to maximize the ROI for the customer, because it means we're taking a percentage share of those particular tokens. So that's kind of from a Havelo perspective. When it comes to the actual DePINs themselves, it's really up to the DePIN to go out there and create the demand, i.e. the usage of their particular network. And just to be like, super clear out there, we are still early days. We're really 2 years into, development of all things DePIN. And, supply, and I come back to the concept of it's the chicken or the egg. My view is the egg comes before the chicken. And in this example, the egg is the supply side. We need to be building and having millions of computers around the world who are effectively running and building out this decentralized network before big corporations and businesses feel comfortable in using this kind of infrastructure. And sort of coming back to the comment I made earlier, a lot of the DePINs are using the cold start model in order to incentivize the building out of the network, particularly those where you need to go and spend $500 or $1,000 buying a bit of hardware that you put at home or into your car. And I think the hope and the expectation of a lot of these projects is, as the network grows and they become more resilient, that will attract more dollars into the network. And then it means a percentage of that revenue can actually get paid to the users of it. So it's not just issuing the token and creating inflation, it's actually real revenue coming through. And, there are multiple models out there. Helium's, almost every week they're burning a bunch of tokens, which is basically a percentage of their revenue. They kind of buy and burn. And I think at Havelo and a lot of the DePINs, we've got the same kind of philosophy, albeit I think US legal counsels usually say, don't talk about that. Don't talk about buy and burn, because it's kind of a crosshairs of the SEC, albeit that may change with the new US administration. But that just kind of gives you a little bit of insight of some of the economics around it.
That's really interesting what you just said, and something kind of clicked from a wording perspective regarding Havelo, which is basically Havelo is looking to build a giant distribution network. Like if you can build out like that giant user network of people that are constantly using this, you basically have an avenue for these DePIN projects to plug into and get access to, potentially thousands of computers around the world, which is needed for them to run their networks. And so by building this distribution channel, you're basically becoming the GTM for a lot of DePIN in the world, which you've talked about with the cold start problem. It actually ties into a question someone had, and I'll come back to you, Chris, to answer that like previous question just real quick. But someone linked this. Would there ever be a chance of Havelo actually charging integration fees to DePIN networks as you get to a stage of like mass adoption around like the distribution network where you've got so much user power that not are you able to generate fees on an ongoing basis, but you actually are able to like charge licensing or upfront stuff in a way like that?
Yeah, and we've already had conversations with some DePINs that have approached us about effectively, I want to get access to X thousands of nodes in these particular areas, and the way that would work would be pretty simple. One is we'll integrate you. You've got to pay us a bunch of tokens that we're going to share with our users. So I think of that as the cold start, and you're going to have to buy some of the Havelo token and stake it at the same time, creating demand for our token. So absolutely, I see that as part of the, let's call it the phase of building out the supply side. But if I'm going to look forward, 5 years time, and we've got, Havelo, we've got millions of computers around the world running multiple DePINs across all of these verticals, it would be only logical to take, once again, I'm going to put my nerd hat on and say it's only logical to take basically an API wrapper, an SDK, and wrap all of these DePINs into basically let's call it an API, expose that to businesses. And so businesses can just plug into the Havelo API and use all the DePINs across all the verticals without having to deal with all of these tokens and all of the, once again, the nuances that come with trying to deal with Web3. So effectively allowing Web2 companies to use DePIN, and that's kind of what gets me super excited. That's obviously our North Star. We've got to crawl before we walk, but I think that's the opportunity and power of DePIN, and obviously the opportunity and power of Havelo.
Nice. Chris, do you want to weigh into that previous point about sustainability?
Yeah, I think what Dom had mentioned a bit earlier in the call, right, is like getting in early is always better. And I think that can always be an easier sell than to actually sustain a business. You see it across all of Web3. There's like there's a cycle, right, amongst even other segments. I believe there's real utility in the DePIN space, right, and it's adequate value definitively. And that's something that's often missed, right? I think when it comes to all promise, no deliverance with a lot of Web3, right? It's all basically speculative. So I think there are benefits there. What I think will be the natural progression of things is the earliest of adopters, where I feel we're at now, right? Joe Soap or whatever is just running something on their computer, right? And gaining tokens. And that's where we stand now. But, at what point in time does the scalability match that someone does go out and pay $1,000 for a computer, right, or a machine, whereby they can maybe break even off it, right? The natural sequence of mining in Bitcoin was in this process as well, right? It was just normal people who did it. Then people started to see from an SMB level that fundamentally it was profitable, right? And people started to invest into these things. You remember the people in the US, right? They used to have, to the point, a number of miners, right, besides like power plants, all this kind of stuff, right, in terms of saving on compute. So where does this space go, right? Does it follow that path? And like at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, do we actually just end up in the same place again, right, with a lot of centralized maybe 10 to 20 bigger players, right, beside these power stations that are providing all the compute for these DePIN projects? I would probably think that that's maybe a better path for it, right, if it is to be sustainable, as opposed to seeing 3 to 5 million people running on a Windows laptop across the world at any given time to enable that same power. So if the space is to be successful, I think it will follow the same path that we've seen success happen with this type of decentralization.
Awesome answer.
That's my opinion, right? I don't know enough about the space, but I would imagine that it's probably going to follow in that path.
Awesome answer. I think for sure. So it seems that Dom's actually got a hard stop in about 5 minutes because he's got to jump on the hour to an investor call. So maybe I know we've got a bunch of questions. there's specific questions about DePIN and Havelo, so maybe we can direct those towards like a Discord chat for the mods to answer. And maybe to wrap it off, if you could give like maybe 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, Dom, on Havelo, maybe Chris, you can a couple minutes on Clink, and maybe have some CTAs there about like how can users get involved. If there's partners on this, how can partners get involved? And maybe just like a high level overview of the benefits brought to users. I think that would probably be a good tie-off. I know we've got like an IDO launch underway currently for Havelo. So just anything you think you share that's good in that like couple minutes, Dom, and then we can wrap up the call.
Absolutely. Thanks, Simon. I think the best way for people to dip their toe in the water is literally go to havelo.com, download the application, onto your machine. If you're too afraid to install it on your own machine, do it on the spare machine. We know, many people have got, spare desktops and laptops sitting at home or at the office. And what we're finding now, really interestingly, I think the last stat I saw, on average, one person was running, I think, 1.8 nodes, which basically means, I'm running a node at home, I'm running a node at my parents' house, one at the office. And so we actually know people running multiple nodes. And the reason they're not running them all in the same house, I mean, they can, is that some of the DePINs, like your Mysteriums and your Sentinels, which use basically your IP, you can only share your IP once. And that's why you kind of want to have those physical locations. And this comes back to, why can't you do it in a data center? Well, you can for some DePINs, but for other DePINs, you can't. You actually need and you want that physical distribution. You made a comment with regards to Discord. Like, we've got a great community, really engaged community on Discord. I encourage people, if you've got questions, go in there and basically ask away. We've got our TGE coming up next week with an airdrop following suit. So, the best way is, go to havelo.com, follow us on X and Discord.
Nice.
Amazing. Over to you, Chris, to wrap up with your segment on Clink, and then wrap it up.
Sure. So if you're not feeling like going directly to Havelo, you can also catch, I just actually even just share my screen right now. I don't know if it will show. I think we're a bit blurred out. But we have the Havelo airdrop directly on the Clink app as well, amongst other DePIN projects that will be coming as well. So we have a number of partnership announcements. What we are, as I've mentioned, is a distribution of offers across many different partners, right? But you can basically manage it all via the Clink app. You'll be able to track your points. You'll be able to see how you're performing against others, etc. We have a weight of features whereby you're actually able to maintain your activities a lot more comprehensively, feature rich. So clinkfinance.com, that's KLINK. We named Clink after the noise a token makes when you put it in a piggy bank, just for reference. It's an onomatopoeia. And we are also quite close to our TGE as well. Surprise, surprise, like many projects at the moment. So we're not as quick as Dom, right? But we'll be there quite shortly as well. So, when you earn airdrop points on Havelo, you're actually earning airdrop points on Clink as well. So double whammy. And we're an ecosystem of offers where you can start from zero. So guys, thank you very much for the call today. I enjoyed it. Educational for me as well, right? And we can roll it back at any point in time. And Dom, best of luck next week.
Amazing. And all the links will be added to, if people watching this on replay, we'll add the links to the bottom of YouTube because it's being streamed on YouTube. And Tony on our socials will make sure that we put Havelo and Clink in there as well. I'm sure the community will be seeing a lot more of Clink, both Clink and Havelo upcoming. So, So guys, it's been an amazing space. I'll let Dom run. Obviously, we've got the IDO currently underway. We've just, I believe we've just announced like whitelist participants. So we'll have the sale and then followed by first come, first serve. But hopefully you guys delve into DePIN. We've also made some videos on Havelo and videos on DePIN in general. Delve in, download the app, start earning, jump on Clink, find opportunities to earn through Clink as well. And we'll see you on the next ecosystem hour or through the ecosystem. Thanks, guys. Thanks, gents, for jumping on.
Cheers,
Thank you,
guys.
everyone. And have a good evening or day wherever you are in the world.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.